This week, on our main topic here on Mastering Dungeon, we are going to continue our look at the industry and what you need to do to become a part of it. So, in previous episodes, we saw what Wizards of the Coast was looking in full-time game designers and game design adjacent workers through their help wanted ads. Then we reached out to other publishers to talk to them about what they look for in freelancers and full-time employees. Last week, we talked about lessons that we learned in game design from our earliest projects when we were young Alpha Streams and young Merwins.
Mad Wizards.
We're not young anymore. So now we're looking at more recent game design lessons that we have learned. What mistakes did we make? What lessons did we learn? And how did we navigate the pitfalls of an industry that doesn't have a lot of money but has a lot of competition?
So we make up for it in volume.
Yes, we do definitely make up for it in volume of mistakes. So last time we talked more about sort of the organized play third edition era that we were in. And so some of those lessons carry over, but a lot of it, third edition was a much different game than fourth edition, which is a much different game than fifth edition. The industry has changed from very analog to very digital. The ability to make money in the industry, while still low, has increased from what it was back then, as gaming licenses have changed and opportunities have opened up to get your work out there in different ways. So I want to start with 3 overall lessons that we've talked about and we will continue to talk about. And Teos, if you want to comment on any of these, go ahead. And if you want to add to them, go ahead as well. The first lesson that I've learned going from third edition to fourth edition to fifth edition to different games and different forms and different formats is there's an old saying that was coined originally by an architect named Louis Sullivan. And then Frank Lloyd Wright sort of changed it a bit. It's form follows function is sort of the truncated version of what Louis Sullivan said. Form and function are the same thing as what Frank Lloyd Wright said. But really what they mean is before you can decide on the form of something, you need to decide what the function will be. And if you try to create something, give it form without knowing what its function is going to be, you will end up not making the best possible thing for the job that it's supposed to do. And while this is for architecture originally, it sort of travels through different industries, maybe with some slight variations, but the concept remains fairly sound to me.
Yeah.
Whether you're talking about game rules or settings or adventures or campaigns, this idea of knowing what the function needs to be and all the little intricacies that may be different from a typical version of that need to be sussed out and acknowledged and put into design. Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I would say my worst projects or the most challenging ones have been ones where the people giving me the work did not particularly know what they wanted or didn't tell me what they wanted. They'd keep secrets, or they weren't quite sure, or there were several departments thinking it over and maybe had slightly different perspectives. And that lack of understanding really messes it up. The best projects have been the ones where, like Vault of the Dracolich, where we were all having calls, all the designer teams, myself being a developer, Scott being an editor, Mike Shea being a writer, and then all of us actually writing and developing and doing things and talking about it constantly. So we knew exactly what we were trying to do. Or when we worked on Acquisitions Incorporated with Scott, right? You and I and Scott, like just from the beginning, having a say in what this book should be. You and I dreaming up a possible table of contents and then working on it with the Penny Arcade team. That means that when it came time to writing, we really knew what this project was trying to do, right? And that is such a big difference. Then yes, you're going to do the right form for that function.
Yeah. It's like every corporation that you might work for or work with, they have their guiding principle or their motto or their
Mhm.
5, virtuous rules. And only this is like a good version of that,
Yes.
right? This is an actual, rather than just having these pie in the sky thoughts, actually be working toward
Hmm.
bringing to life a thing in a form that you can use.
Yeah.
The flip side of that is, since function may be different, form will also often be different, and that makes it hard for us to come up with thou shalt or thou shalt not commandments
True.
for this industry, because there will always be some out of the ordinary desired function that requires some sort of unusual form. And as soon as that form looks different, people will sometimes push back against it, not realizing that it's that form for a reason, because we are trying to work toward this particular function. So every time we say, do this, there's always an implicit do this unless you are working on this
Yeah.
other thing or this other goal or this other desired function.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. I mean, there have been projects where, like when I worked on Hero Quest, where I had some wild ideas, but Hero Quest is a board game that plays a particular way. And whenever I would
Yeah.
talk to the project manager about some of the wackier ideas, they would correctly point out, well, that's going to kind of not, you could go that way, but just know the expectations won't support that. And so
Mhm.
you'll be causing, a brain twist on the sides of the players. I'm like, okay, this is not the place for that. So let's back that idea and come around it a different way.
Yeah, and that leads us directly into lesson number 2, which is know your medium, but never be beholden to it, but know it.
Mm-hmm.
Because by knowing it, you can avoid situations where you try to do something different, but you end up inadvertently breaking the form rather than enhancing the
Yeah.
form. So when we talk about that, right, always be ready and willing to break the rules, but know to your heart the rule that you're breaking and understand the consequences of breaking that rule. And what comes to mind for me always is the initiative system for
Mm-hmm.
different games, including 5th edition D&D. Because what's the first thing that people play D&D, they play it for a long time, then they go play a different game, a different system that has a different initiative system, and they love it because it's different.
Yeah, sure.
And the first thing they want to do is bring that back and put that into their 5th edition D&D game, which is a fine impulse, but you have to then think through consequences and know the ramifications of doing so.
Yeah. And you forget how many things in D&D sort of hinge off of the initiative system, including just what the character, the player chose to do with their character when they wanted to get a high result on initiative, right? And be
Mhm.
dexterous and take the particular feat and whatever, and you throw in some other system and you've invalidated that, right? And so
Mhm.
but there are so many other ways as well where the game really works off of that initiative system, and to change it is to rub against those other elements, usually in a not
Mhm.
so great way, unless it's for a very specific type of scene.
Yep. Yep. So again, keep that in mind anytime you're designing. Know what you're doing. Try to break the rules, but know what that will mean. And the third thing I want to talk about, lessons that I've sort of learned over the years, is my preference and my experience are not the same as the totality of the audience that I'm writing for. I may like something and I may have to work on a project where I'm doing something that isn't my preference. But at least for the time that I'm designing, that needs to be my preference. That needs to be the thing I love. I need to learn to love this so that I can do the best job about it. Write what you know is great advice. Write what you love is great advice up to a certain point. But when you become more advanced, uh, when you get to the point where you're trying to do different things, it's not write what you know. It's start from where you know and learn.
Mm-hmm.
It's
Yeah.
write what you love, but learn to love other things, or at least learn to appreciate other things.
Yeah. Yeah, the games are bigger than we are, and the audience is bigger than we are, and it's worth kind of picking those design battles where you want to be really creative. So like with fifth edition Adventures League, that I only wrote 2 adventures, but the ones that I did for the official organized play program, um, I deliberately wanted to do wild things with them, and the reason was that I was thinking about during third edition organized play how I was so influenced by some of the wilder ideas we saw. Because
Mhm.
you play hundreds of adventures and then you have those that really stand out. They don't necessarily have to succeed wildly, but they do something so
Mhm.
different that you're like, "Oh, that was neat." I didn't think
Mhm.
an adventure could do that. And just the other day, I got a review, or I was seeing a review on this one adventure I wrote, Howling Void, where it was like, "I hate prepping and running this adventure." Was the
Mhm.
comment, and I wrote an apology and said, "I'm sorry. When I wrote this, I knew it. Some people would really this would not work for some people, and
Mhm.
and I made that choice because the audience I was trying to serve was kind of more targeted towards the people who would benefit from something wild being in an adventure rather than every
Mhm.
single table and DM out there. And I made
Mhm.
that choice knowing that, it might go that way. I will say I made the same choice when I wrote The Artifact, my other AL adventure, but I did that in a better way. So I think people don't react that way. Like they don't have trouble prepping for it or playing it or running it because it's a better job at being different without being difficult. So I did
Right.
better my second time around, right? In that way.
When I was on the Keolin Triad, one of the first things I did was put a sort of a Yahoo group survey out. And it was a question about prep time and complication and how much weight is appreciated for the effort versus making a simpler adventure that's a little more straightforward. And people, a wide margin said yes, make it more difficult to run or prep if it has to, as long as it's going to be different. And those adventures were by far the least liked, right? So people say they wanted it,
Yeah.
but then when the consequences of making it that way
Yeah.
were presented to them, they did not like it.
Yeah. When they're prepping the week before the convention and go, oh, I really have to spend
Yeah.
more time on this, then it's harder. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, it was also the players.
Yeah.
Right. The players said, yes, we want something different. And even if it's a little more complicated and it may not be the best experience ever, uh,
Yeah.
it, and then they're like, no, we don't like this.
Mhm.
So, it's sort of that be careful what you wish for. And
Yeah. And
players,
yeah.
like patience lie.
And know the danger of it, right? Know that you're going to create something super complicated. Some people that you may be creating a worse experience. Now, yes, it's great that there are various shades of complexity, right? You don't want everything to be simple that's out there, but just know that you're running into that problem. And it's why I think in a lot of written adventures or let's say official D&D 5e adventures, that complexity can be very low
Mhm.
because I think they rightfully fear that will bounce off of a lot of people, and it's true.
Yeah. Okay, so let's talk about our newer experiences. Third edition was great. We had a great campaign in Living Greyhawk. We had some other sub campaigns. I worked on Xendrik Expeditions,
Awesome.
which toyed with the idea of rather than tracking things just on paper, using computers to track. So at the end of a game, the game master would go online and answer the questions that your group how they did, and that would trigger a certain number of experience points or magic item access, etc. And then you would go and check on your website. Oh, what level is my character now? Oh, what could I do? And this was pre smartphones, right?
Yeah.
This was like you got to log on
Yeah.
and
On
look
your
at
laptop at
this
night.
on your laptop. Yep. So
Mhm.
you couldn't advance during a convention, during a show. You'd have to wait till the end. Uh, and so, weird things like that were going on. It was a great experiment that did not work for so many reasons, but it taught me that the format of a campaign can greatly affect everything. How the rules work, how the adventure needs to be written. When we wrote adventures for that, or even though it was just a third edition organized play campaign, so much else needed to be taken into account because of the way that the campaign was set up.
Yeah. And was so Xendrik Expeditions was first, and then was Mark of Heroes after that?
Mark of Heroes was
Was
first.
first, okay.
Then
And
Xendrik Expeditions.
and
Yeah.
which was the one that had that introduced factions? Because that was a big change too.
That was Xendrik Expeditions.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was a big. I remember that being like sort of the first organized play campaign where people were talking about, hey, I'm a member of this group and I have this, agenda, and that was also a very interesting thing to play with, I'm sure.
Yeah. There were 4 factions. I was overseeing the Crimson Codex, which was the mysterious arcana, strange prophecy group, which was the hardest to write for easily, and probably the least popular by far. But I'm sure it was just because of me. But so if your character could join this faction or had to join this faction, and you played your faction adventures, but then they made adventures where a member of any faction could play sort of the core adventures. And what I found out immediately was, let me step back. The 4 factions were the good, aligned, everybody is out for great, let's save the world. There was the military faction, which was like a mercenary kind of setup. There was mine, which was this prophecy-driven, esoteric stuff, secret-filled stuff. And then there was the evil faction, where you could play an evil character if you were in this faction. And then we had these crossover adventures where people from any faction could play together. And the first thing I saw was, as soon as you give anyone the slightest crack to be able to work against another player, they are going to take the jaws of life, or the jaws of death in this case, and just put it in that crack and open it as wide as they possibly could, which was fun for certain types of players and very disappointing for game masters and other players who wanted to role play it but not be like, I'm going to. Yeah.
Yeah, that's so super interesting. I mean, what a great. I mean, it's amazing, right? You got to see that, and I'm sure part of the reason you know so much about organized play, because you ran those campaigns. You were part of the 4th edition official campaign. What was that like?
Yeah, that was different as well. And this is where 3rd edition came and went. 4th edition was announced at Gen Con. And I still remember I got the key to my room and it said like 4 adventure, but it had, it was like adventure, but it had instead of the a 4.
Okay.
And so that was like, hey, is 4th edition coming? And then they made that big announcement about 4th edition with the really weird sort of announcement. And then they had an organized play session after that, where they basically said, hey, this campaign you love, it's ending. But we're going to do a Living Forgotten Realms. We're going to bring the organized play living system to the Forgotten Realms. And I was like, okay, cool, whatever. And some people were like, I'm never playing D&D again. And most of those people, I made sure I said, I'll see you next year. And they're like, I'm not coming back next year. And then they came back next year to play the 4th edition game. But I still remember at Winter Fantasy sitting down with Chris Tulloch, who said, all right, you are one of 3 people who are going to be running this campaign. These are the rules we're implementing. And he started listing off the things. And I hated every single one of them. It was, we're going to allow people to replay adventures. That was the opposite of what Living Greyhawk was. We're going to let DMs run them and then play.
Yeah.
I was like, why are we even bothering? And it took me a while to realize that I am not the audience for everything. there are other audiences out there. Sometimes they are a vast majority, and I am in the great minority. And that turned out to be the case in this case, because of the replayability, people were more willing to game master. They were more willing to DM because they didn't have to eat the adventure. Oh, I
Yeah.
ran it, so now I can't play it. And every rule that Chris said I had an issue with, and everyone for this campaign, the way they had decided to run it turned out to be exactly right.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I certainly saw in fourth edition that those friction points where things were changing. And I mean, the truth is, it's really hard to know something at that moment for what it is, even if you have a strong understanding of the past. You can only make your best guess for where you think something will go. Um, I think from the beginning, I saw some issues with what Living Forgotten Realms was trying to do around regions and stuff. And not to get bogged down in this, for the show, but seeing that when you change systems, well, this is going to have an impact. What exactly will it be? Maybe I don't know for sure, but it's going to have an impact, and it'll be interesting to see. And I think that bore true with Forgotten Realms that it was that way. But as you said, sometimes when we're doing something, we just have to take that plunge because it's what being asked of us. If we like the job, we must serve it and try to do the best we can with it, acknowledging that what we prefer may not be what's going to get the most people to play a game of D&D or whatever the higher calling is, right? And like I've seen that, not to jump to 5th edition, but in working like Emerald City Comic Con or PAX D&D events, there is a total difference between what I would like to play at a convention and what I would like to run or offer to people, and what will do the greatest good at those conventions in terms of signing people up, serving the audience that's walking up, right? And when you meet those people as they come in and tell you what they want and where they are in their life cycle of D&D, primarily very much at the beginning, then you realize, well, this is what they need, right? And that's different.
So along those lines, you then ran at the end or near the end of fourth edition, your own organized play campaign, Ashes of Athas. So what was it like ramping that up, and what was that like trying to bring Dark Sun to an organized play campaign with a larger campaign already in place?
Yeah. So yeah, Living Forgotten Realms is obviously huge. And one of the early things is people would say, like, this is going to be bigger than Living Forgotten Realms. I'm like, no, it's not. Like, let's be honest about this. I understood enough to know we're going to be small. And in fact, that's what we need to do. We need to be the niche for people who either want to play something else that's different, or they don't particularly love what the main program is. So they want something else that gives them a different type of experience. So we've got the latitude to be different, right? In fact, maybe even the imperative to be a little different, but without taking ourselves too seriously. Like, know that you've got to kind of carefully take care of your audience because it's a small one, and craft a really good experience. And so we broke a lot of rules, but we did so with a lot of thought. And one thing that we did that was really nice is, you had folks like me who were, dyed in the wool, super trained on all the previous organized play campaigns, had played all sorts of organized play. But then we had folks like Derek Gooder who were brand new to this kind of thing, had only seen it from afar. Or like in the initial days, we had like Chris Sims helping us, who would ask like, will players really like strip the furniture and try to sell it? And it's like, yes, they will if they can gain from it. Like, if you start allowing for this, behavior will emerge. And they couldn't really believe it, right? But they would also come with really fresh ideas as to how to, and ask these great questions that would lead us down towards particular paths. And that was a great learning experience, and thinking about, because we didn't have to do exactly what Living Forgotten Realms did, we could think about the way we build story arcs, the way we build player, what the characters do changes the story. All of that we were able to do, and it gave me tons and tons of knowledge as to overseeing writers, dealing with the writer who doesn't turn things in or turn something in that isn't great, being a developer, right, which was really neat, like, giving it that extra polish to make it work. And coordinating things like art and maps and all of that. There's just so much that I learned from that experience, and then seeing it play and run and trying to support DMs and seeing folks, like Alan Patrick before he became a 5th edition admin, the way that kind of I found him was he was at working Winter Fantasy, and he was like the marshal that was helping seat people for Ashes of Athas. And he said, "Hey, I heard some complaints about a DM." So I sat at their table the very next slot to just see what was going on, and then talk to them, and they're just over their in over their head. And so they're gonna, bow out next slot, and here's what we're doing to help it. And I just thought, this guy's amazing, right? Here's a person who's so cares about it all being in the right places. And I think it helped lead him to be eventually becoming an admin and so much more, because he was that kind of person, right? And being at conventions like this, volunteering, helping, that's what happens. People notice that you're great, and they give you opportunities and so on, which is awesome.
So fourth edition was your first foray into actual writing for pay in the D&D world, yeah?
Yeah, for pay. So I had done some third edition work with Living Greyhawk, as we talked about last episode, but nothing had ever meant money, and so it was worth. And you, in fact, gave me the first adventure for part of a Thayan series that I wrote for you. I think because you saw me kind of doing some stuff as at sort of the hobby level. And so you invited me to write, which was super cool, and it was really fun getting to know you. I met you at Gen Con. I think you were taking a bite of a sandwich when I met you, and I had to wait for you to finish.
Sounds about right.
And but it was fourth, so getting paid to do an organized play adventure was novel. Certainly not life changing, but it was a novel. Hey, I'm actually getting paid and seeing my convention run at Gen Con. That was really cool. But what it did, and especially the Ashes of Athas work, what it did was lead to getting noticed, right? So like Chris Perkins played at my table through an Ashes of Athas adventure, and he asked who wrote it, and I said that I did. And probably because of that, a little bit later, I got a, would you like to write a D&D Encounters season? And I actually said no. I said, I'm going to frame this email because this is so cool, and I'm so thankful you asked me. But I can't do that because Ashes of Athas is all consuming, and there's no way I could do a good job on this. And I thought, well, maybe I'm shooting myself in the foot, and that's the last opportunity I ever get, but it wasn't. I got a lot more opportunities after that with Wizards, but that really started my work for Wizards, was the fact that I'd done these things.
My fourth edition experience was strange in that I play tested the rule set, and because I had play tested the rules, they had a limited pool of freelancers to work on projects that they had to get in the pipeline before the books came out, which was essentially 4 different projects. One was Living Forgotten Realms. One was some articles for Dungeon and Dragon magazine, which they had moved to digital. One was for a book called Dungeon Delve, which was the short sort of 3 encounter mini adventures that they put a book out of level 1 through 30. So I wrote like 7 or 8 of those. And then Rob Schwalb dropped out of a adventure writing project in their adventure path, so they asked me to fill in for him. So I got to see 4 different projects with 4 different directors at Wizards.
Wow.
With 4 different sort of formats: organized play, short-term articles or adventures, these mini adventures, and then a longer adventure.
Wow.
All while they were still sort of putting the rules together or getting their feet on the ground. And it taught me so much to be in that position, to learn lessons from different people. But it also grounded me in the fact that Wizards of the Coast is like any organization, disorganized.
Yeah.
And so it grounded me. When you first come, especially back then, when there isn't a lot of social media, a lot of interaction, you're like, think these people are just right demigods,
right?
Perfect, you think they're perfect,
solars, right? Just
they're there, they know their shit. Sorry, they know their stuff. You think they've got it all together, and then you realize that they're just like you, right? They have more experience, they have more skill in some cases, but they're just. And so that helped me in that area. But also then as social media became more prominent and the anti-Wizards of the Coast sentiments became magnified by the echo chamber, I also realized that they're not evil.
Right.
Corporations may be evil, right? But the people that populate it
Right.
are
We're all
just
good.
trying to they're
Yeah.
just trying to do their jobs, and they're generally fine folk. Uh,
Yeah.
and that has been so important for me to keep my sanity uh, over the course of a 25-year career now.
Yeah.
Uh, so important.
Well, you've often been a mentor to me, and one of them was when you shared like your fourth edition stories of like writing before the rules were truly finalized, and then for fifth edition, I had a project. Well, both the D&D Next project where the rule sets were changing, Vault of the Dracolich, and then writing the first epic for Gen Con for Adventurers League, and I'm asking, okay, so how do I know which monsters to use because they don't have CR values yet.
Mhm.
And they're like, yeah, sorry. I'm like,
Mhm.
okay. And then I just remembered Shawn telling me about monsters in early fourth edition not being balanced yet. And so I was like, okay. So I just, picked monsters I thought were cool, ran a playtest with my home group that was all under NDA and
Mhm.
TPK'd them. And then I changed it and TPK'd them again and changed it again. And then it
Mhm.
worked. And I had to do that for every encounter because there
Mhm.
were no CR values and nothing told you what monster was related to anything. They didn't have XP values either. The only thing I did have was from Rich Baker's work writing Lost Mines of Phandelver. I had those. So those contained CR values. And I could
Mhm.
guess maybe roughly which other monsters were along that track. When the event ran at Gen Con, I was just crossing my fingers hoping it all worked. And I think so were folks like Chris Dulac, I hope this
Yeah.
works. And it did, but it took a lot of work to get it there.
Yeah. And that those times of transition are, multiply it by 100, the the awkwardness of trying to put together something that's already not perfect to start with, and then all that change. I worked on two D&D Encounters seasons.
Uh-huh.
The first one was War of Everlasting Darkness, which was a bridge between fourth edition and D&D Next. They
Mm-hmm.
knew fourth edition was ending. They hadn't announced it yet, but they knew it was going to
Mm-hmm.
end. So they wanted to sort of experiment with the D&D Encounters format, which was a very linear adventure where you play one encounter that evening, people level or not, people gain stuff or not. Then the next week they come back and they play the next encounter.
Mm-hmm.
This was play a chapter of a novel that could take place over months in one session. Fourth edition had daily encounters, daily powers, encounter powers, at will powers. So we had to mess around with those. And it was as you would expect. Some people thought it was cool, but for the most part, people were like, "Why are you breaking something I love?"
Yep.
Then the next season, they already moved into D&D Next. They had already released the first version of those rules. So now they wanted an encounter season that could be playable for fourth edition or D&D Next. And it also broke the D&D Encounters mold by being less linear. They wanted you to start in a town and be able to move in different directions. Well, the whole point of D&D Encounters was if I don't show up a week, I'll just catch up the following week because it's a linear game. And whoever showed up will throw at a table. And we know they played this encounter last week, so they'll play this encounter this week. And this was completely different in that you could start in the town and you could investigate the moat house first, or you could investigate the
Yeah.
the temple first, or you can investigate the caves first.
Mhm.
So that it threw all of that out the window. So this was sort of an experiment on top of an experiment on top of yet another experiment, and let's see what we can do. And for some people, they said that was the most fun encounters program season
Sure.
we had
Sure.
because the DM had the freedom to move things around, tell a story. And again, for others, it was why are you breaking what we love?
Right.
How
Right.
dare you, you monster?
Yeah.
So the flexibility and the form following the function, just keeps coming back to
It does.
bear in these situations.
Yeah. What about since then? I mean, you've become full time. You took all those lessons forward.
Huh? Yeah, I don't even know. I'm still I'm still trying to get my feet under me. I became full time first just as a freelancer, then working with Ghostfire full time. Now back to freelancing, but still working with Ghostfire, and it's just giving me the time and the opportunity to expand what I've been working on. So now instead of just writing an adventure, which is hard enough as it is,
Hmm.
now it's like overseeing three different books being written at the same time with rules and with settings and with adventures all trying to come together. And it is overwhelming, but I wouldn't want to be doing anything else, if
Hmm.
that makes sense.
Yeah, yeah.
uh, and what about you? What's your like path now that fifth edition is here and you're moving forward?
Yeah, and I think it's interesting how you just from year to year you don't know what you're doing. You're just kind of trying to get some work or do whatever. But then at some point you realize, oh wow, I've sort of changed how I'm doing things, right? And so I think initially I was, I wanted to do more organized play. I wanted to do more Vault of the Dracoliches. My work at Wizards dried up for unknown reasons, but then I started getting work with other companies, and really when I look back at it, I've been really lucky. I've had really fortunate, whether it's Hero Quest. I mean, Hero Quest is a game that's beloved by so many designers, was formative to them, and so many of them said, "Oh, I'd kill you to work on Hero Quest," and that was my board game experience, right? But also kind of adventure writing in a different format. And working with groups like MCDM, I feel very lucky to do that, and there's been a lot of great creativity, but then also trying to do my own things and experiment a little with it, even while all of it has to be done for me, because I have two kids in college and various other financial things. Like, I can't stop my day job, right? As much as I would like to, that must continue. And so it all has to fit in around and be done at night. It's also led to, like this podcast or experimenting with doing YouTube videos about me eating bologna sandwiches. These are all things that I'm discovering as I try to find how to make a difference. And I think that's what I go back to is, I think of like why I did this. I do like designing a lot. I mean, I love it. But even more than that, what I like is to see that the game may be improved for somebody, or that they have new ideas or are touched by it. And that's not only just through play, right? So that's where I think, like, you and I doing this podcast and talking, breaking down concepts of the industry or the Success in RPG series or whatever, can accomplish that better than an adventure sometimes, or accomplishes different things. And so I've changed up what I'm involved in, and I turn down a lot of work because I'm not necessarily looking for the shiny project. And as I mentioned last time, sometimes the shiniest of projects get canceled because they're a little too shiny. And so, trying to find that, how can I help this hobby out while having it be creatively awesome going forward. And I think as we get older, we start thinking like, and I only have but so many years of this left. Right? You see the people that were mentors for you and that you thought of, and you see, wow, they only have so many years left. So then you do the math and you realize, oh, I only have so many years left. And you start thinking about that as well, which is, I think, a whole new era that we'll be entering as we think about, okay, do I turn off the spigot or turn it down or change the way I approach things because of that, right? Like, I don't know. We'll see where that
Yeah.
leads.
Yeah, I'm in that same boat looking back and saying, I think I'm a better person for having played this game
Hmm.
and for having been in the industry, having met the people that I met, whether they're players, game masters at conventions, or industry people through corporations and companies, or you name it.
Yeah.
And I want other people to have the availability of that experience.
Yeah.
So I can't necessarily do that just by writing, even with Wizards of the Coast hardcover book,
Right.
right? As
Hmm.
fun as Halls of Undermountain was to write,
Hmm.
there's other ways and other audiences to reach. And so something like teaching, I hope will give that spark
Yeah.
for what the gaming did for me to other people.
Hmm. Yeah. Yeah.
That's all we can
Absolutely.
do.
Yeah. That's all we can.
So I hope that Teos and my experiences have helped everyone out. Again, if you have any questions, you can hit us on social media or email us at masteringdnd@gmail.com, and we'd be happy to go into detail on any of those experiences and what we learned. So thank you, listeners out there. If you would like to support us, you can do so by going to patreon.com/masteringdnd, and you can become a Master of Dungeons supporters, and we really appreciate the people who are doing that. You can become a Master of the Realm supporter, and you get listed here in our show notes, or you can become a Master of the Multiverse patron, and you force me to say your name on the show. We're going to start from the bottom this time. Zilwalt Winfrey, Zach Types, Chris Webster, Javier Waziak, Jason Ward from Accidental Cyclops Games, Graham Ward, James Walton, Marcelo de Velasquez, The Valiant DM, Joe Tyler, Ceres, Jeremy Talaman from the D&D and TV podcast, Talos the Stormlord, Josh and Liwa Nika of the Tabletop Journeys podcast. All right, here we go. Spark from Dunor Games, Dunor Games. Krishna Simosa, Andy Shockney, Chance Russo at Drago Russo, Runner Rick, Ozymandias Rex, Pugnus, Vladimir Prunner from Croatia, Robert Pasley, Post Fiction RPG Audio, Frog Prince at Tentacles Squelching Wetly, Phil Wirt from the Philadelphia Area Gaming Expo, Mighty Zeus, Tom Nelson from the Deck of Player Safety, Falcon Neal, Sean Molly, John Mickey, Trey McLemore, Anna B. Meyer of Fantasy Cartography, Eric Menke, the Math Magician, Paul Mata, Chad Lynch, Jim Klingler, a.k.a. DM Prime Mover, Brian King, J.R. of the Twilight Perspective, The Mighty Jerd, Mark and Mary's Gaming Compound, Sean Hurst, Ben Heisler and Paige Laitman, William Harshman of Runeforged Tabletop Gaming, Scott Fitzgerald Gray at Insane Angel Studios, James Fisher, Andy Edmonds at Nerdronomicon.com, Will Doyle, Evil John, Calvin Bridges Avalos, Merrick Blackman, Steve Bissonette, David Bastiansen, Craig Bailey, Lou Anders of Lazy Wolf Studios, Keith Ammon of The Monsters Know What They're Doing, and first but not least, Agile Monk. Welcome. Thank you so much for your support. Again, go to patreon.com/masteringdnd if you would like to support us in ways that help us keep our show going. Teos, I've always wanted to see you eating a bologna sandwich. If, say, I wanted to see that again over and over in super slow motion, yeah, where would I do so?
You can go to alphastream.org, and from there you can find my YouTube channel where I do indeed talk about branded lunch meat. And do I eat a bologna sandwich from the 80s? No, but I LARP doing so, I guess, and while talking about the importance of branding.
Mm-hmm. And I will LARP being a game designer at all the socials. And you can also follow the podcast on YouTube. It's the Mastering Dungeons YouTube channel at youtube.com/@masteringdungeons. So we have gone through our careers and shown how very much we've learned and still have so much yet to learn. So what should we do now?
I'm going to create a time machine and go back in time and trade places with you and see what your career was like from the inside.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I'm going to go eat a bologna sandwich. Slowly.